better if I push the button. Today we want to talk about some perseverance through failure. We've got as our title for our lesson, Atychophobia. Of course, you know phobias are fears. And so this particular fear we want to look at this morning, and hopefully it will help us to be able to overcome this fear. We want to persevere through our failures. All of us are going to fail at one time or another in one way or another. And yet we've got to keep going. We can't let our failures be the end of us. And so we want to look at that this morning and talk about some things. And we particularly want to consider a passage in 2 Corinthians. I think I have it maybe mislabeled. I may have labeled it 1 Corinthians, but it's 2 Corinthians. It's right up here, but on the paperwork I may have put the wrong verse, or wrong Corinthians. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 7 through 18. I want to look at that entire section and then we'll draw some lessons from it. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellence of the power may be of God and not of us. We are hard pressed on every side, yet not crushed. We are perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not forsaken. Struck down, but not destroyed. That's an important one. Sometimes we're going to get struck down. Sometimes we're going to get knocked down. But that can't be the end. It can't destroy us. Verse 10 then, always carrying about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, and the life of Jesus, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our body. For we who live are always delivered to death for Jesus' sake, that the life of Jesus also may be manifested in our mortal flesh. So then death is working in us, but life in you. And since we have the same spirit of faith, according to that is written, I believed and therefore I spoke, we also believe and therefore speak. Knowing that he who raised up the Lord Jesus will also raise us up with Jesus and will present us with you. For all things are for your sakes, that grace, having spread through the many, may cause thanksgiving to abound to the glory of God. Therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our light affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. While we do not look at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporary, but the things which are not seen are eternal. I think about there's a lot of good lessons in there, and maybe another time we'll look at some of the others. But you think about some of those things. We're pressed but not crushed. We're perplexed but not in despair. We're persecuted but not forsaken. We're struck down but not destroyed. We don't lose heart, verse 16 tells us. We're facing affliction, but he says it's a light affliction. Sometimes it doesn't feel very light. And certainly I think for Paul, who had been stoned a couple of times, who had been shipwrecked a couple of times, who had been chased from one place to another, he'd done all kinds of things that we'd say, what do you mean light affliction? In fact, God himself said, I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake. And yet he says, oh, it's light affliction. And, it's like a mild headache. No, Paul, you're suffering a lot. But he says it's light when you compare it to what we're going to get, what it's going to produce. He says it's just for a moment. It's just a short period of time, and it's working an eternal weight of glory. And when we could keep that as our focus, and Paul did a good job of keeping that as his focus, and that's why to him it seemed like a light affliction, because it was comparing a short period of suffering with an eternal period of glory with God. And if we'll look at it that way, we can overcome any of the difficulties and failures that we may be facing. Sometimes we are afraid, though. None of us like pain. Go to the doctor to get a shot. If you look at that needle, it hurts worse. Why is that? We're afraid of it. We're scared of it's gonna hurt. If you go to the dentist and the dentist starts to go to get that drill, it hurts. Before the drill even gets there, it's already hurting. We're anticipating that. And the anticipation of that pain and that suffering causes fear, and that fear can cause other issues with us sometimes in various different ways. The story is told of a baseball catcher, and there was a rookie pitcher on the mound. And up stepped to bat one of the best batters. Now, he'd already faced two batters. They'd gotten hit, so they're on first and second. And now up steps one of the best batters of their time. Maybe some of you who are baseball fans will recognize the name Stan Musial. He stepped up to the plate. And the catcher gives the pitcher the sign for the pitch. The pitcher shakes it off. He gives him another sign for a different pitch. He says, not that one either. Shakes that off. The catcher goes through every signal for every pitch he knows. And the pitcher shakes all of them off. So he finally calls time and he runs out to the mound. He says, look, I've offered you every pitch there. He said, what pitch do you want to throw? And he said, none. I don't want to pitch. I want to just stay out here and hold the ball. Sometimes our fear of what is going to happen paralyzes us. And it makes us ineffective. We don't do anything because we're afraid of failure. That pitcher was afraid he'd throw that ball and the fellow had hit a 3-run home run. That's what he was scared. And that fear paralyzed him. We see it all the time. You're driving down the road and the deer's going across the road and then he sees your headlights or she sees your headlights and that's why we get that phrase, like a deer in the headlights, right? Because that fear paralyzes. And sometimes our fear of failure, atychiphobia or atichophobia, is the fear of failure. And sometimes our fear that we're going to fail causes us to not even want to try. Because we might not succeed. The fact of the matter is, of course, that we can't succeed if we don't try. And nobody succeeds at things the first time, every time. Nobody. It just doesn't work that way. Some of us have a tendency, I didn't do that the first time, I quit. I'm not good at that. Instead of realizing, if we try a few more times, maybe we will get better at that. We watched that Amazing Race show where they're racing around the world doing all sorts of different tasks and things. We love watching the different cultures and things, but sometimes it's funny to watch them. We were watching one yesterday and they had 10 chances to throw, what do they call that, a bolo thing? It's something the Argentinian cowboys use. And it's got a ball on one end and two balls on the other end with a rope in, and you swing that thing over your head and throw it, and it wraps around. And they had 10 chances. One of the teammates got it around the legs on the second try. So the other teammate had 8 tries left. While the other teammate, he throws it 6 times and he's failed. He still had 2 more turns. But the one who had gotten it on the second try said, never mind, you're not going to get it. Let's just quit and leave and go do something else. Because sometimes they have a choice. They can do one thing or another thing. Now, give up on this and let's go. He had 2 more throws. At least let him finish those 2 throws. At least let him try 2 more times. But no, you're never going to get it. So let's go. Don't know. Don't know whether he would have got it or not. But they wound up losing and getting kicked out because they quit and went to do the other thing, which took a long time to do. Sometimes our fear of failure causes us to want to quit and give up and throw in the towel. Fear of failure is a dangerous thing. But I think one of the reasons that we have a fear of failure is that we look at it in the wrong way. I think we have the wrong perspective on what failure is. True failure is giving up and quitting. Somebody can run a race, ride a bike race, or whatever else, and they can fall down a dozen times, but they haven't failed unless they just stay down. A boxer can get knocked down and then get back up and keep fighting and still win the round or win the match. It can happen. You can fail and get up and keep going and try again and still succeed. True ultimate failure is when you give up and quit. And as Christians, we can never give up and quit. Well, I mean, obviously we can, some do, but we should never give up and quit. The problem is that we don't often appreciate the positive significance of failure. Positive significance? What? Failure is not positive, failure is negative. It doesn't have to be. We need to think about failure differently. Let's think about a few people who failed in life at various different things. I'll mention a few of these. And this is not in a religious sense. This is just in society in general, various different things. Most of you have heard of Fred Astaire. He's pretty well known. Well, one casting director wrote a note about him that said, he can't act, but he can dance a little. Okay. Walt Disney. Everybody's heard of Disney. Well, Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor because he didn't have any creative ideas. Really? Now, our modern Disney company doesn't seem to have any more creative ideas. They just keep rehashing the old ones. But he had a lot of creative ideas. Well, of course, he went bankrupt several times before he wound up building what has become the Disney empire. Albert Einstein, one of his teachers described him as being mentally slow. He might have been slow, but he was right. You take your time, and maybe you do need to go a little slower mentally sometimes. And he was denied admission to the technical college that he wanted to go to. He didn't get into the college he wanted to go to. And yet later on, of course, he's well known for his genius. Winston Churchill probably saved England from being defeated by the Germans by his unwillingness to quit. And yet, He flunked out of the 6th grade, and he was defeated for every election for public office until he actually became prime minister at the age of 62. It took him a long time to reach his peak. He was a late bloomer. But his determination during World War II made it possible for England to survive the barrages of German bombs. And it's interesting, he came over to the United States on one occasion and gave a speech at a graduation ceremony. And he began that speech. He said that this, what the most important thing, he said, this is it. Never, 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 never give up. That was it. Now, he did go on and talk a little bit, but that was his message. Never give up. Not just never, but never, 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 never give up. And that determination is what helped England make it through World War II. What about Beethoven? His teacher said he was a hopeless composer. Well, I'm glad Beethoven didn't give up. I like some of his music. It's pretty good. What about Louis Pasteur? Pasteurization, killing bacteria by heating things up. Well, he discovered that, but before he discovered that about bacteria causing diseases and causing food, spoiling, before he discovered that, he was ranked 15th out of 22 in his chemistry class. You'd think the guy that was first would have figured all that stuff out, but no. The guy that was 15th out of 22. Leo Tolstoy wrote War and Peace, which I've never read because it's way too big, way too long, and it's written in Russian, so there's that. But they do have translations. I'm not sure how good the translations are. I don't know. I've never read it. But he flunked out of college and was described as being unable to learn. Jonas Salk tried 200 times to get a vaccine for polio before he succeeded. 200 failures. But somebody asked him, what does it feel like to fail 200 times? He said, I didn't. He said, I never failed 200 times at anything in my life. My family taught me never to use that word. I simply discovered 200 ways how not to make a vaccine for polio. He eliminated 200 possibilities. And if you eliminate the impossible, whatever you're left with is the truth, right? So he eliminated those 200. And he finally got it. What if he'd given up after 100? What if he'd given up after 20 or 150? He would have never gotten it. The turtle. He only makes progress when he sticks his neck out. And that's true for the rest of us. We've got to try. We've got to take the risk. We've got to stick our neck out. And that's what Paul's really talking about here in 2 Corinthians 4. We're going through these difficulties. We're having these bad things are happening to us. But we can't just pull into our shell and curl up and wait for it all to be over. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work that way. Or Thomas Edison, 8,000 experiments before he made that light bulb. After 7,000, he said, I know 7,000 things that won't work. I'll keep trying until I find the one that will. Here's the thing. We think of failure as the opposite of success. But failure is not the opposite of success. Failure are just the rungs on the ladder to success. Failure is a vital ingredient in the overall chemistry of success. And think about the risk of failure. See, that's what we're always worried. There's just a risk. I could fail. It won't work out. It might not happen the way I want it to, and so on and so forth. But think about that. If you laugh, it's to risk appearing the fool. Some people, you laugh and then someone says, "What's wrong with you? Why are you laughing? That wasn't even funny." And you look like a fool, perhaps. To weep is to risk appearing weak. To reach out to another is to risk involvement. To expose your feelings is to risk mockery. To place your ideas and dreams before a crowd is to risk their loss. Somebody could steal your ideas. They could steal your dreams. To love is to risk not being loved in return, to risk rejection. To hope is to risk despair. If you never have any hope, you're never disappointed. But then you never have any hope. To try is to risk failure. However, failure to try is much worse. Because the greatest failure in life is not to try. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, and is nothing. If we don't risk, if we don't try, yes, that person may avoid some suffering and some sorrow and some loss, but he can't learn, he can't feel, he can't change, he can't grow, he can't love, he can't live. She can't either. Male or female, it makes no difference if we don't try. We cannot succeed. Only the person who takes that risk is free. Sometimes children especially, but even adults sometimes, they'll ask if God knew that Adam and Eve were going to sin, and if he knew that so many people were going to reject him, why did he ever create people in the first place? Because of love. God is love, and love demands a recipient. Somebody's got to receive that love, even if it means that love may not be returned. But just one person returning that love makes it all worthwhile. God loved us. He created us then with the ability to choose to love him in return. Other people say, why didn't God just, if he knew they were going to sin and some were going to reject him, why didn't he just make everybody robots that had to obey him? Because that misses the point. He wanted us to love him. He wanted us to choose him. And that means he had to risk us rejecting him. And a lot of people have rejected him, and a lot of people continue and will continue to reject him. But he took the risk because he so loved the world that he gave his own son. That kind of risk. And so, what are our fears many times in the church as Christians? What do we fear so much? Well, we're afraid to talk to others about their beliefs. Well, what if they say they believe something different than what I believe? That could be uncomfortable. That could be awkward. I'm afraid of what that would mean. We're afraid to talk to others about their religion. I don't want them to think I'm nosy. I don't want them to think that I might not agree with their religions. We just won't talk about it. We're afraid to talk to others about their salvation. Even somebody that we know is living in direct rebellion to God, and then they talk about going to heaven, but we're afraid to say anything about that because we might hurt their feelings or we might make them mad at us. So we're afraid to say anything. We're afraid to talk to others about their sin, things that we know are sin. I saw a chart. Brad Harrod posted this chart a couple days ago on Facebook, and it shows how many people in our society today and what they think about people living together before marriage, sex before marriage, and particularly living together, not just even dating and somebody involved in premarital sex, but actually just living together before they're married. Only 14% of the people that were asked about that thought it was wrong. 14% of the people in the United States think it's wrong for people to, and another 19% thought it was wrong if they're not planning to get married at some point in the future. But the majority, over 50%, close to 60%, thought, and there was a few, that just didn't answer the question, but the majority of people thought, yeah, no big deal, nothing wrong with that, it's perfectly fine. Whether they're going to get married or not or whatever, it doesn't matter. You just live together, break up, live with somebody else, break up with them, live with somebody else. So our society has turned, and yet the majority of people say that they're Christian. That's not a Christian view. That I can live with somebody that I'm not married to. I'm not talking about some people living together as roommates or something. We're talking about living together and having a relationship, a sexual relationship, a romantic relationship together. I don't have a problem with it. We're afraid to talk to others about their sin. We're afraid to even call it sin. We're afraid to talk to others about their children. My children were doing some things that were disruptive. They were causing some trouble. They were afraid to talk to me about it. I might make them mad. Maybe. But if the children are being disruptive and disobedient and causing a problem, it needs to be addressed. And I'm glad somebody did. They called and said, hey, we need to talk to you about this. Talk to me about it. Hopefully we're getting better. Hopefully we're getting it fixed. If not, somebody needs to talk to me about it again if it's still going on. But we're afraid sometimes. We're afraid to confront and risk conflict. We're afraid to risk rejection. We're afraid to risk so many things. Don't be afraid of failure, though. Failure are as much a part of God's plan for us as our successes are. In fact, you learn more from your failures than you do your success. When you succeed, you think, okay, yeah, that was easy. You see it with sports teams all the time. As long as they win, they think, oh, yeah, we're doing good. We won. But let them lose a game. And then they say, wait, what's wrong? Well, what's wrong was, yes, you won those other games, but you weren't really playing together as a team, or you weren't really doing what you should have been doing. You weren't watching the fundamentals or whatever else. And that's what you wound up losing when there was a team. You came up against a team that actually played up to their potential and played with the fundamentals and played as a team and did the things that you weren't doing. And it showed. I can remember it was a big deal in the Olympics. They had our NBA basketball players, the dream team, the best players from the NBA Basketball Association in the United States. The best ones, superstars, guys that are getting paid millions of dollars a year to play. And they went to the Olympics to play for the United States. And they lost to some other country. Basketball's America. I mean, people talk about baseball's American sport, but basketball's an American sport. And our professional players, the all-stars of our professional league, lost to amateurs from another country. Why? How does that happen? Because they didn't play as a team. They were all superstars and they were ball hogs, and they didn't play together as a team. They thought they were just so talented that they didn't need to work together. And they lost. It was an embarrassment for our country when our basketball team of professional basketball players couldn't beat the amateurs from another country. But we can't be afraid of failure. If there were no night, there'd be no day. If there was no winter, there'd be no spring. If there were no valleys, there'd be no mountaintops. If there were no disappointments, there'd be no joys. If there were no defeats, there could be no victories. And yes, if there were no failures, there would be no success. We need to look for ways to succeed instead of worrying about and being afraid of failing. Sometimes you got to fail before you can succeed. So what is the value of failure? There's value to it. Great accomplishments are often attempted, but only occasionally reached. Those who reach them usually failed and missed many times before. Failures are only temporary tests to prepare us for permanent triumphs. That was Charles Swindoll, denominational teacher and book writer. But it's a very accurate statement. You don't accomplish great things by sitting around doing nothing. If you want to accomplish something great, you're going to have to try and fail sometimes. Most authors don't write the best-selling book of all time on their first try. They had a lot of manuscripts rejected, and the editor marked out a whole bunch of stuff a long time before. Robert Schuller said, "I'd rather attempt to do something great and fail than attempt to do nothing and succeed." What about you? Are you willing to take that risk to do something great, to do something good? Or are you just willing to succeed at doing nothing? Are you ready to fail until you succeed? Paul said, we're going to be crushed, we're going to be pressed, we're going to be beaten down, knocked down, but we're not defeated. We get up, we try again until we get it, until we succeed. If you're here and you have a need to respond to God's invitation for any reason, please do as we stand and sing our invitation song. Just as I am, without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come, just as I am, and waiting Spirit, my soul.